Through the Gates is produced under the support of the Coloradans for Responsible Wildlife Management to enhance, promote, and defend the North American model of wildlife conservation and responsible wildlife management. That's our mission. We're engaged in fighting at every level so that wildlife management remains science-based and conservation continues to work for our wildlife. To learn more and join the movement, visit SaveTheHuntColorado.com. The North American model of wildlife conservation is the greatest conservation model in the world. It's a success story that should be shared and celebrated because everybody is a part of it. Welcome to another update version of Save the Hunt with Through the Gates. It's early in the 2025 legislative session, and while we're dealing with things in Colorado with the Colorado Parks and Wildlife Commission, we've also got issues going on at the Colorado General Assembly and things that people need to pay attention to over the course of the next several months as things kind of weed out. But one of the big things that have happened maybe in the last 6 weeks has been the rumblings in the jungle. A lot of people have been reaching out about a repeal or an attempted repeal on Proposition 114, which was introducing wolves in Colorado back in 2020. And so we did a little bit of investigation. We've had a lot of conversations with the individuals that are attempting to run that reversal, that ballot reversal. It won't come out until 2026 if they're successful of going through the appropriate stages through the title board, the Secretary of State, and maybe even the Supreme Court, depending on if they get challenged or if language needs to be modified in some capacity. But we wanted to bring people's attention to it because not to distract away from anything and maybe to give them some good information about what they can do if they want to support this cause. But in the next day or so, several of us, most of our groups of the Colorado Wildlife Conservation Project, are meeting with the proponents of this particular measure to repeal Proposition 114 from 2020. And so we'll get into that a little bit. And while we're carrying on with it, you can go to smartwolfpolicyco.com, and that's the website of the organization that is attempting to do this repeal. These are all Colorado individuals, and they've got some notoriety to fame and their political aspirations of what they've done through their career. And I've talked to some of them, and while I won't give too much information, I'll let them turn around and do that on their own. I wanted to bring this up because if people think that's going to happen through the General Assembly, that's not the case. And if they think it's going to happen in 2025, that's not the case. But these guys are trying to get out in front of things early, try to go through the necessary procedures in, like I said, the title board, the Secretary of State with their language to where they can start gathering signatures, much like what we had to do in opposing Proposition 127, which started out as Initiative 91. The interesting thing about this particular subject is the only change that they would actually put as a single subject, one-line change in that proposal that was the proposition that was done in 2020 is where it says in the original text, it says, take the steps necessary to begin reintroductions of gray wolves by December 31st of 2023. Well, if you've paid attention to what's going on in Colorado, that's what Colorado Parks and Wildlife did. They adhered to the law. They introduced the first round of wolves by December 31st of 2023. The additional line that would be thrown into this would be and end reintroduction of gray wolves by December 31st of 2026. That's a single subject that is required under the Colorado statutes to be able to get something on the ballot. And they're in the process of doing that through the title board as we speak. We don't know if they're going to be successful in that. We don't know what sort of money that they've been able to raise, but we're hopeful that if they can put something together like what we were able to with the Coloradans for Responsible Wildlife Management and Colorado Wildlife Deserve Better, the Issues Committee, that they can bring together the community, the sportsmen and women community, the ag community, and the general public community together for a common goal. I think one of the questions that needs to be answered, though, is to what benefit would that reintroduction, that one line, be added into the original text of Proposition 114? And if it's intended on ending reintroduction of gray wolves by December 31st of 2026, In theory, there still could be 2 additional wolf releases, or maybe more, depending on what CPW actually decided to do. Just recently, Colorado Parks and Wildlife in January of 2025 reintroduced another bunch of wolves from British Columbia. Now, they haven't been successful in getting wolves from any other location in the United States, so they had to go out of country. Those wolves are now on the ground, as are the Copper Creek pack that was recently reintroduced after being reintroduced before, being captured and then put in captivity because they were causing problems on agricultural properties up in the North Park area, the Grand Lake area. If you look at the language of this, is it really going to make a difference in what we have to deal with, or would it just be a stopgap on what Colorado residents maybe try to do moving forward with the logistical, science-based management of gray wolves in the state of Colorado? Now, we're not arguing the fact that 114 didn't pass or did pass, or that it should have passed, or we should have turned around and did something different. What we're arguing about is at what level of the game do we continue to structure that reintroduction process? An interpretation through the ballot itself from 2020 could align with a lot of the things that are happening in this one-line revision of ending reintroduction of gray wolves by December 31st of 2026. The management plan is in place, and there's a lot of people on both sides of the fence that are not happy and other ones that are happy with what happened in 2020 and how that's actually kind of come to fruition over the course of the last 4 years. But what we do have is, in Colorado, we have wolves on the ground. And we have an agency with Colorado Parks and Wildlife that is trying to adhere to the law of what the Colorado voters voted on, albeit by a small margin. They have to enact the law, and they have to do so accordingly, but they also need to be considerate of the ranchers and the farmers and the recreationists and the sportsmen, and they also have to be considerate about what wolves are going to do and how they're going to be managed when it comes to Colorado's wildlife resources, some of which are watchable wildlife, some are non-game, some are threatened and endangered, and some are game species that Colorado Parks and Wildlife needs to be able to have that money, license sales, to be generated so they can sustain a $400+ million agency. This particular ballot initiative that would change the language by one line could indeed stop further reintroduction past 2026. Concerns are how many wolves would be on the ground between now and then, and would they be appropriately managed? Could they be appropriately managed? And is there an attempt to further maybe dismantle the introduction process anyway? Some people would like to see that. A complete reversal would probably not gain the support of the general public. But a modification to the introduction itself might provide significant benefit to Colorado Parks and Wildlife's ability to be able to manage all wildlife in an appropriate science-based management process. But it would also allow the sportsmen and women and the ag-producing community itself to know that there's an end to introduction and that we're not just going to continually add and add and add because somebody wants to get numbers to a different level than what was originally intended on. I'm not saying agreed to, or intended on. If you want to support a company that supported the efforts to defeat Proposition 127, then you need to support Davis Tent. Davis Tent has provided quality canvas goods for outdoorsmen for the last 50+ years. For more information, go to davistent.com. If you want to support another business that was instrumental in helping us defeat Proposition 127, check out Salida Gun Shop. Salida Gun Shop in Salida, Colorado provides quality products, expertise, and knowledge from individuals that actually do what they sell. Go to salidagunshop.com. Listen to the advice of Cameron Haynes and support companies that are supporting your cause and your efforts. Minturn Anglers is one of those companies. Minturn Anglers provides product and fishing excursions in Colorado and are second to none. For more information, go to minturnanglers.com. If anybody's paid attention over the course of the last several years through the Colorado Parks and Wildlife Commission, you've seen how this has been just a contentious altercation, confrontation, in and around and every discussion that they've had when it came to wolf introduction. The Colorado General Assembly has talked about this through the Colorado Joint Budget Committee, about the funding, which is millions of dollars over budget, millions of dollars more than what they originally intended on. This is not a small venture, and the taxpayers of Colorado deserve to be able to make decisions based upon facts. And the facts are we have wolves on the ground. The facts are they voted for them in 2020. And if this ballot initiative itself is so lucky enough to be able to get through the appropriate processes and procedures with probably some sort of animosity or opposition, if this was to pass, would this be enough to suffice both sides of the aisle, the people that wanted wolves and the people that didn't want wolves, the people that are happy that wolves are on the ground and the people that are displeased that wolves are on the ground because they have to live with them? They've had livestock loss. They've had headaches and hassles and monetary economic distress. This particular issue, if it was to pass in 2026, would it be enough to suffice both sides to accomplish the goals in 2020 and to be able to allow people to figure out a way to live with what happened in 2020 and allow the science-based experts, the managers of Colorado Parks and Wildlife, to be able to do what they need to do? One thing comes to fact. The biggest thing that we have to say is that we know ballot box biology does not work. You should not be attempting to manage wildlife through the ballot. We need to be able to turn around and let the experts manage wildlife, whether it comes to mountain lions or wolves or wolverines or whomever. Let's keep politics and wildlife and wildlife. For more information, make sure you turn around and go to smartwolfpolicyco.com and always keep apprised of what's going on in our neck of the woods with SaveTheHuntColorado.com.
Dan, you brought up the money side of wolves. I think there's some misconceptions. Like, where's that money coming from? Is it coming from license sales like a lot of other wildlife management is, or is it general fund taxes in Colorado?
That's a good question. The money on the wildlife side is strictly prohibited to be able to use for wolf introduction. Everything that's coming out right now is coming from the General Assembly, the legislature. So it's taxpayer dollars that are coming into that. Now, there's other funds that come into the management side from the proponents of 114. They came up with a license plate and they've got some grants and they've got some other funding that's coming in. But the actual management money itself is not anything other than coming out of the tax dollars. And the General Assembly appropriated money for that, as well as compensation that now they've backtracked on because the state is in such a financial budget crunch. They're trying to figure out a way to save money at any way, shape, or form they possibly can.
With your conversations in Parks and Wildlife, if they are not hamstrung by the laws of Prop 114 and by a governor who's got his hand on the scales pretty heavily, in your conversations with Parks and Wildlife, what is your sense of how they feel about their ability to manage wolves like any other wildlife? Because that's all they are. Like, they're manageable wildlife.
Well, I've been to almost every meeting, and I sat on the stakeholder advisory group for the wolf management plan, and I can tell you that while there might be some individuals within Colorado Parks and Wildlife that would like to see more wolves on the ground, they would like to have. I know that they would like to have the unequivocal authority to be able to turn around and manage those wolves appropriately. And if some of that is in lethal means, that so be it. If some of that is to bring more wolves in without a deadline and without some sort of oversight or manipulation, so be it. What I see right now is there's so many avenues when it comes into the wolf introduction side of things that are beyond the control of Colorado Parks and Wildlife because of the politics, because of the agenda, and because of how things have been laid out. They know they have to adhere to the law because that's what the voters voted on. But that being said, there has to be some variances, some gray areas in what they can or can't do. And if it was completely up to them, I think that things would be done differently. And I think that they would actually be done better for the wolf, for all the other wildlife, for the ranchers and farmers that are being affected, for the conservationists and the recreationists and the sportsmen and women, and for the proponents of the measures as well. the amount of time and effort that's been spent over the course of the last several years between meetings and fighting and backbiting and inside manipulation and backdoor deals. And I mean, having to go to Canada to get something when we have a plentiful wolf population in the United States, and all of the other states have said, no, we're not going to give you wolves. Even Washington, where this director came from, he came from Washington. They had wolves that came from Oregon to start with, and then Oregon said, no, we're not going to give you any more wolves. Look, this is something to where political agendas take over and override the science side of things. And I think that the general public, based upon what happened on Proposition 127 by a 10.5% margin versus 1.5% on Proposition 114 back in 2020, it shows that the general public is waking up to the fact that maybe I want something and maybe you don't want something, but what do the experts have to say? And we should allow them to continue to manage Colorado's wildlife resources.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of Through the Gates. For more content like this, make sure that you like, follow, and subscribe on all of our channels.